Hey, good afternoon. I'm Heather Sullivan. Thanks so much for joining us here on Sullivan Smart Sense. It is great to have you with us. I'm really excited to be sharing today's show with you because I have a guest that I've been dying to talk to. He's one of the foremost experts in consumer advocacy in solving all kinds of consumer problems. And his specialty is, in particular, solving travel related issues for consumers. So we're going to have a lot of really interesting things to talk about. And one thing I'm really excited to talk about is he has found a solution to that issue that I've covered many times for you, which is about Zelle scams, Cash App scams. I know so many people have lost money to those. We're going to talk about a solution to try and get your money back in some of those cases. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Christopher Elliott from Elliott Advocacy. Thanks so much for being with us.
Hello, Heather. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for coming. It's so great to be able to talk with you. And I can't wait to kind of dive into our conversation. For anyone who may not see all your articles in USA Today and the Washington Post and all of that, just tell us a little bit about your background and what you do with Elliott Advocacy.
Okay, I consider myself a consumer journalist and consumer reporter, a lot like you. I started two nonprofit organizations. The latest one is just called Elliott Advocacy, and I work with a team of very talented advocates and other reporters and researchers, and we help people solve their consumer problems. So we post articles on any kind of consumer problem that you might have, and then we also will do one-on-one mediation if something goes wrong and you can't fix it by yourself. And the coolest part of the website actually is that we have executive contact. So if you run into a problem and you can't get help, you can appeal to one of the CEOs. You know how you're on the phone and you say, I'd like to appeal this to someone, and they say, no, we can't release the name of the CEO. Well, we go out and find the name of the CEO and publish the name and the actually sometimes also the phone number. You wouldn't believe the kind of legal trouble it gets us into. Fortunately, we have a little thing called the First Amendment, though.
Well, that is fascinating. Yeah, I've seen on your webpage that list of contacts. You can choose the different kind of issue that you're having and then find the contacts for the different companies. I think that's a great resource. What inspired you to go into consumer advocacy?
Well, I started off my career many years ago as a business journalist, and I just noticed that there were a lot of reporters out there who are kind of advocating for the businesses, not a lot of reporters advocating for the consumer. And I started getting emails. Well, back then it was mostly phone calls and letters from people asking for help. And I decided that I was going to try to help them. And that kind of got the ball rolling and turned into a nationally syndicated column. I spent 16 years at National Geographic helping advocate for consumers there. And then the columns that you see today and the nonprofit as well. So just kind of like it took off from there. It was a little bit of like an avalanche, just kept going.
Well, I think you do great work. So I'm really, really excited to be able to share some of your knowledge, with our viewers. As I was mentioning to our viewers at the beginning, one of the things that I saw that you wrote about was this issue that I've covered many times, and that is people losing money to scams over these payment apps, Zelle, Cash App, things like that. And we often hear from the banks, oh, there's no way to get your money back. Once you send it, it's gone. But I saw that you've actually looked into this and found sort of a legal way for people to try to get their money back. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, when you make a payment on a credit card, you can use the dispute process under the Fair Credit Billing Act to get your money back sometimes. And there's a very well-established dispute process. But what people don't realize is that there's another dispute process for money transfers. And this is where the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is going toe-to-toe with the banks right now, is because the banks are saying, no, the law that's out there can't be used in that way. And the CPFB is saying, no, it can be used. And the law is called Regulation E. And it basically says, if you've made a mistake and you've sent someone money, the bank has to go to bat for you the same way that it does for credit card disputes, and it has to help you. It'll reverse the transfer or whatever. And what's happening now is that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is actually coming up with new guidance. But when you go to the website and you really do some digging, which is what I did for the story, you realize that the agency has already said, look, if you were enticed in some way to send money to someone fraudulently, that as in, you were sending a scammer the money, the bank needs to help you get that money back. It needs to help you reverse that transaction. And a lot of people just are not aware of that. I think a lot of banks don't even know about it. So this is just a matter, and what you do, of course, is you educate people on what their rights are. So if people know about Regulation E, I think more people will actually use it, and it'll become as common as a credit card dispute would.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to do a follow-up story on that. And it's interesting what you mentioned, that not even all the banks are aware of it. So they probably get some pushback if you're a consumer and you say, well, hey, there's Regulation E. They need to be prepared for the banks maybe saying, what are you talking about?
Well, and actually, the banks interpret Regulation E differently. So you could, if you had someone from a bank on right now, they would say, no, 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 that's not what Regulation E says. But the federal government says, yes, that is what Regulation E says. And guess what? If the federal government comes out with guidance, that will be the regulation, and that will be the law, and the banks will have to follow it. So that's why we've been seeing these hearings now with Elizabeth Warren taking the banks to task. I'm sure you saw the hearings. That is actually going to be a really big thing going forward. And Zelle is going to have to answer, and all the banks participating in Zelle are going to have to answer for all these scams that they've allowed to happen.
Yeah, we'll be keeping a very close eye on that. So thank you so much for sharing that information. I really appreciate it. We're going to dive into travel in particular for our audience today, because I know that's your particular area of expertise. And we have been watching, all these delays and cancellations, and airports packed with people, and their trips are being messed up. So first, let's just talk a little bit about that. We're approaching the holiday travel season. Talk a little bit about what you think consumers should do if we continue to see these delays and cancellations. We know demand's going to be really high this holiday season. What should we as a consumer do if we start to find ourselves in those situations?
Well, this summer was truly horrific by any measure. In the first 6 months of this year, you had almost 3% of all flights were canceled, most of them in June and July of the summer. And then you had roughly 20% delayed. The average delay was somewhere around 45 minutes. And what I'm hearing from experts is that was just the preview of what's going to happen.
Oh, no.
I'm so sorry. So disappointing. Yes. Just a preview of Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's, and probably also spring break. Demand is so high, even though inflation is just doing crazy things. People want to travel, and the reason why is that they haven't been able to travel for the last 2 years. So what you see now are really high, record high airfares for Thanksgiving and Christmas. You got to be crazy to go out there and travel right now. But what we also have is a labor shortage, and airlines still have not gotten their act together. The difference between summer and Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's is that summer is over, maybe a 2-month period, 2.5-month period, the traditional summer travel season, which runs from Memorial Day to Labor Day, and Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's all compressed into a couple of days. So it's just going to be crazy. I mean, I'm telling everyone to just avoid travel if you can, especially air travel.
Yeah. I always try and travel maybe in earlier December, that way, because if you're stuck over the holidays in an airport, it kind of takes something off of the whole trip.
Absolutely, it does. Yeah. Well, you had asked about tips, and other than the obvious tip of maybe not traveling or postponing travel, see if you can get on the first flight of the day if you still haven't booked your flight, because no one wants to get up at 4 a.m. and go to the airport, even before a holiday. So you could conceivably end up with fewer crowds, not that long line that we saw a couple of weeks ago I think it was in Pittsburgh where it was right out the door and into the parking lot. You will not see that for the really early flight probably. But then as you go on later in the day, yeah, it's going to get crazy. So that's one thing that I would say you could do. And then the other big travel tip for the holidays is if you can fly on the holiday itself. I know it sounds really, almost like a counterintuitive. Why would you do that? Or why would you miss Thanksgiving dinner? Well, because that's what everyone else is thinking. I'm not going to travel on Thanksgiving Day. But you could still fly in early in the morning and have Thanksgiving dinner later in the day. What you'll find is that the planes are maybe flying half full because no one wants to fly on that day.
Good tip. And I've seen you kind of address this in some of your articles, but if your flight has been canceled and you're really due a refund, I know that the airlines kind of try to offer different things. But what do you do if you're sort of, getting an impasse immediately anyway about trying to get that refund secured?
Well, when an airline cancels your flight, it's going to try to offer you the next available flight. And if that doesn't work for you, it's going to try to convince you to take a credit. But under federal regulation, the airline must offer you either a credit or a full refund. And they may not tell you that. So the refund must be processed within 7 business days, according to the Department of Transportation. And as a practical matter, it takes more like 2 to 3 weeks because it goes through your credit card and, it's 2 to 3 billing cycles and all that stuff. But it needs to be a prompt refund. If you're not getting a prompt refund, your best course of action is you ask in writing. I have executive contacts on my consumer advocacy site. So if you just go to elliott.org, you can find, that's 2 L's and 2 T's, you can find all of the executive contacts, send them a polite email and say, I'm still waiting for my refund. It's been 2 months. And if that doesn't work, you can also go to the DOT. The Department of Transportation actually has a complaint form you can fill out, and they will light a fire under the airline for you.
Yeah, they're really working on behalf of consumers. They just created that new website, the customer service dashboard, for people to see what the airline policies are in some of these situations.
Yeah, high time that they did something like that. Also, there's a new regulation that they just introduced yesterday that would force the airlines and the online travel agencies to, when they quote a airfare, to tell you what's not included in it. So, you get to see if it includes luggage, like with Southwest does include luggage, or if it includes a drink or, whatever. I think people need that information. DOT's doing a good job, finally. Took them long enough.
Yeah, I like that they're doing that. One of the great things that's out there that you've talked a lot about in some of your articles is that if you buy your tickets with a credit card, a number of credit cards will offer you a travel insurance, basically. Can you talk a little bit about that and also what to do, again, if you're getting pushback from the credit card? Because I saw that you helped a woman who had spent like $15,000 on a trip that had to be canceled because her husband got sick, and she experienced some pushback getting that reimbursed. So talk a little bit about what you do if you find yourself in a situation like that.
Yeah, many credit cards will cover you. And it's not just the ones that you spend, a $500 membership fee on or annual fee. It's Visa and MasterCard. If you have a card and you use it to pay for travel, you probably have some kind of insurance covered. It's not the gold-plated insurance, though, that you get if you go to like an Allianz or a Generali or Seven Corners. It's a little bit more generic, more limited, and you really have to read the fine print. So if you're thinking of using that coverage, make sure you know what's in it before you decide to not do the regular travel insurance. One of the things that my team has been noticing is that claims have been going much slower. And the reason is simply that there have been more claims. This summer's air travel delays have just boosted the number of claims, and they're taking their time. Some insurance companies really do, I think it's part of their model, is that they try to slow down the process as much as possible, ask for as many documents as they can in the hopes that it'll just go away. And so that was really the issue that I had with this woman that I helped, is that it sure looked like the insurance company it kept throwing more requirements up, asking for more documentation, until finally she said, Chris, I need your help. And I contacted them, and they finally gave her money back. I mean, it took, I think, 3 months, 4 months before she got her money, but she finally did.
Wow. Well, the other thing that I've been hearing about, and I know that you've touched on this too, is this rental car agencies sometimes coming up with additional things you have to pay for at the end that weren't expected. Maybe some damage that may or may not have been done by you. Can you talk a little bit about that and what people need to know about kind of just the rental car market these days?
Yeah, rental cars are really expensive because there's this chip shortage, and cars, the rental companies can't get their hands on enough rental cars. So the odds of you, well, first of all, you're going to pay more for your rental car, but also it's going to be a more high mileage car. The problem with that is that a lot of these cars have pre-existing damage. So what you had mentioned, it's called the ding and dent scam, and that's where they hand you the keys to a car. You don't inspect it. You don't take your before and after pictures, which you should always do. And then when you arrive to return the car, they say, oh, look, there's a ding here, there's a dent there, and they send you an invoice. And the invoice, coincidentally, is just below $500. And can you guess why it's below $500?
Because 500 is the limit?
That's the deductible on most car insurance plans. So they don't want to get your car insurance involved. They just want you to pay out of your own pocket. Because once the insurance company is involved, then they're going to start asking questions like, well, we want to see the repair records for this car and all that. So you have to be really careful. Now, this ding and dent scam has been around for a really long time. I have seen more cases recently, though. It looks like the car rental companies are trying to make a little extra money by charging people for dings and dents that were pre-existing. So always, always, always take those before and after photos.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And I read somewhere that someone was even complaining about saying that they were smoking in the car, and they don't smoke, so
that was a rideshare.
Yeah.
Yes. That was the picture of the Marlboro man sitting in the back seat lighting up. Okay, if you take a Lyft or an Uber and you're smoking in the back, you probably deserve to pay a damage fee or a cleaning fee. But this woman got charged $150 by Lyft for smoking in her car, and she doesn't even smoke.
Oh.
So and they had pictures of a cigarette burn in the back of it. It looked like a puncture hole in the back of the car, and the driver sent the photo to Lyft and said, this woman was smoking in the back of my car, and look at what she did. And he sent 2 photos, but they were 2 photos of different back seats. And I thought to myself, okay, something is definitely going on here. So I sent the photos to Lyft, and I said, can you just take a look? It looks like this is a different back seat. And also, they had stripped away, the driver had stripped away the metadata from the photo. So you couldn't tell when it was taken, which is very suspicious. Always look for the metadata to make sure that the photo was taken at the time that they said it was taken. This works also for things like hotel damage. So when they say, oh, you destroyed the TV in the hotel room, you can say, okay, let's look at when you took this photo. But anyway, I sent it to Lyft, and Lyft immediately removed the $150 fee. That's part of a family of scams known as the vomit scam. And that thing is really taken off. A lot of Lyft drivers apparently are sending in bogus photos and damage reports and getting paid $80, $150 for damages that people are not responsible for.
Wow, that is fascinating, because I'm sure people don't expect something like that at all. Can you talk a little bit about cruising? Just as such a savvy travel expert that you are. I know we've been seeing really good deals on cruising, but there's also, of course, the concerns about COVID on the ships and all of that. But just talk to me a little bit about cruising as an option, and anything we need to be aware of as consumers if you're going to book a cruise.
I'm glad you asked me that question, because just today on my newsletter, Elliott Confidential, which is just elliottconfidential.com, I had a story about a cruise line that has started basically kicking passengers off their ships if they tested positive for COVID. And it's a really unfortunate thing because often these people are just left to fend for themselves. They're COVID positive, so they don't want to. They have to spend time in a hotel room, and they can't get out and make arrangements necessarily to get back home immediately. But what you really want to do, I think, is make sure that you know what your cruise line is going to do if you do test positive. Are they going to put you so usually a special floor for people who have COVID, or a deck where it's called an isolation ward. What's going to happen to you, and what is their procedure? A lot of cruise lines don't even disclose that. But if you're working with a travel agent, you need to ask those questions and find out what they are. But cruise lines, it really, some of them are still very strict when it comes to COVID. Others won't test at all. I was on a cruise in Norway a couple of weeks back. They did not even ask me. Everyone just got on the boat, and there we were. If one of us had been positive, we wouldn't have even known it. And I think ultimately that's where we're headed, is no testing, no one cares.
Yeah. Okay. I want to kind of round things back out. And I'm going to show everybody, by the way, this is the website you want to go to for reaching out to Elliott Advocacy. It's elliott.org. But talk to me just a little bit about your advice for consumers. You touched on it a little bit about maybe contacting the CEO of a company, but if you've got a problem and you're not making headway getting it resolved, and I hear from volumes of people every day about these kinds of things. But what would be some of your advice to consumers in terms of trying to get issues resolved, to advocate for themselves, and to, just make sure that they're being treated fairly?
Most people don't realize that the time to resolve a consumer dispute is here and now. So if you're in the store and you've got a problem with a product, that you resolve it right there, because there's usually a manager who is empowered to help you. Don't wait until you get home. Don't say, I'm going to give them a call. Do it right then and there. But if it's something like, a bad flight, and you're home now and you want to see if you can maybe get a refund, the one mistake that I see people making over and over is they don't put their complaint in writing. Instead, they try to call or even do a chat. And there are some companies out there, they're very evil, that won't even let you do a screenshot, or won't even let you do save the chat, because they don't want a record of it. What you want to do is you want to be able to keep a record of all the correspondence. Give the company a chance to fix it. Tell them what you want. Be straight with them. Don't give them any emotional language and say, you destroyed my life. I'll never take a vacation again, whatever. You really want to be as factual as possible. Give them a chance to fix it. If that doesn't work, go up the appeals ladder. So take it to, and I have all of those contacts on my website. So you can go to the vice president of customer service, that person's boss, who's usually, a general manager, president, then all the way up to the CEO. And then always include all of the correspondence previous to that, so that you have a paper trail. They'll know that you've tried to fix this. And then if that doesn't work, they can reach out to someone like you or to me. And if that doesn't work out, they can go to law enforcement. They can say, to the regulatory agencies, to the Federal Trade Commission, to the Department of Transportation, and ask them for help. And as a last resort, they can maybe take it to small claims court.
Yeah. And do you feel like companies are still pretty responsive if you were to say, tweet them or, post something on social media? Are they still monitoring their social media accounts pretty closely and responding to people?
Oh yeah. Social media shaming, that does work sometimes too. Yes. Well, sometimes a company does need to be shamed into doing the right thing. That's kind of what consumer reporters sometimes do, is they say, I'm writing a story about this. I'd like your comment. And then they go, oh man, we better do the right thing,
Yeah.
But what you mentioned, and this is, I think, really great. The great thing about living in the age of social media is that everyone has the opportunity to leverage the power of social media for themselves. So sending out a tweet, using a hashtag or an @ sign to call out the company, that can sometimes really work. And I wouldn't say don't do that, but I wouldn't do that as your first choice. give the company a chance to fix it. And then if that doesn't work, maybe call them out on Twitter and see what happens.
Then go public. I just want to share, we got a good comment from a viewer. Jermaine writes, own more than one phone or have someone let you take pictures of a chat. And she was talking about what you mentioned about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I do that as a journalist. If it's a box, that's the only way I can reach a company. And it's a box where you have to put it in and then you click send and then the message is gone. I will take a screenshot of it before I may not be able to, capture the whole message, but it's proof that I wrote,
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great tip, using the phone. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, listen, thank you so much. Really appreciate you being with us. Again, this is Christopher Elliott with Elliott Advocacy, and this is his website. It's elliott.org, 2 L's, 2 T's, as he says, but a great resource. Again, if you're trying to reach a company to try and straighten something out or just get his newsletter. I love his newsletter. It's great consumer information that'll help you out of a lot of different jams. So, Christopher, thank you so much for spending some time with us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks. It's been fun.
All right. And thank you so much for being with us as well. We really appreciate you being with us. Hope that you got some great information. I'm sure you picked up, like I did, about him saying that the holiday travel season could be a little hairy, could be worse than what we saw this summer. So be sure to be very careful about your planning. Make sure that you're keeping receipts and all that kind of stuff so that you are prepared if you need to go to battle for yourself in any way this holiday season. And we will see you next time.